Hello, everybody. Again, my name is Astrid Rafim-Pellows. I am the Volunteer Services Manager at Volunteer Hospice. And one of the things that we do at Volunteer Hospice is offer this kind of program. This Soul Care speaker series today is with Chaplain Mike Milward, who I will introduce in a minute. For those of you who are new to Volunteer Hospice, just a little bit of background. We were founded in 1978 by Rose Crumb. She was a nurse and she lived in Port Angeles. And we came to life in 1978, which is quite a while ago now. We are literally a unicorn in the world of hospice. And I say that because we are not only local, independent, and non-profit. We offer hospice care and palliative care. And most importantly, we do not bill any government agencies, any insurance companies, or any private party. All our services are free, and we operate with donations and some private grants. Those services are open to anyone in the community, and we have a huge medical landing closet, medical equipment landing closet. We have a very strong grief and bereavement program, and we have this type of program here with speaker series and desk cafe called Tea to Die For. Thank you, John, for the Tea to Die For name. The next speaker series will be on March 11 with Sherry Huber from Living Compassion. But today we're going to focus on finding peace at the end of life. So most of us these days will die a type of death that we will see coming. And this offers us a great opportunity. We have the opportunity to have conversations of gratitude and reconciliation.
Please do something.
We have an opportunity.
Not what she said.
We have an opportunity to come to terms with what our life has meant and an opportunity to leave a legacy of love. So this conversation today is really about what it means to live in peace, what it means to leave those who will grieve us in peace, and what it is to how we can clarify, how we can gain clarity about our wishes, both at the end of life and also for post-death rituals, how we can articulate those thoughts. Mike Milward is going to address all of this, and I'm very pleased to have him today. He's a board member with Volunteer Hospice of Clallam County. He's a hospice chaplain and a bereavement support facilitator and volunteers with us. He graduated with a 2011 cohort from Frank Ostaseski's Metta Institute End-of-Life Care Practitioner Certificate Program. And I also trained with Frank Ostaseski, not at that level, but I have a deep appreciation for anything that Frank Ostaseski done. So when Mike came to us to volunteer and I saw that he had done that, I was like, yes, right on. I felt like a kindred spirit in some ways, and I'm very, very happy to have Mike with us. Extremely lucky. He's also used to be a CEO of the Hospice of Santa Cruz County and the California Hospice Network, and he's published in the field of hospice care and palliative medicine. So we have with us a person who has a lot of experience and a lot of insight into the world of hospice and palliative care. And I hope that you come away from this meeting with an expanded view of what your life means and what your life will have meant for those you will leave behind you. Mike, it's a great pleasure to have you today. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Astrid. Thank you for the kind introduction and the invitation to have this conversation today. I'm excited to be here. Before we start, I want to introduce and give a shout out to Lisa Flores. Lisa is the Senior Director of IT at the Hospice of Santa Cruz County, where I used to serve. And she is the genius behind the slides that you'll see today. I'm a little bit all thumbs when it comes to IT. So Lisa, thank you very much. It's helpful for me, and I hope for you, to take a moment to breathe before we begin. So let's be quiet together for just a moment. Close your eyes if you wish. Let's start by each of us taking 3 deep breaths. And as you are aware of your breathing, feel your feet on the floor, your bottom in the chair. Whatever the day has been for you thus far, let that go. And whatever awaits you after our time together this afternoon, let that come when it will. For now, give yourself over to this time and place and to what will happen between us and within us. Thank you. When I was 6 years old, I came home from school to find my mom blowing into the mouth of my 5-week-old baby sister. She had pneumonia. I learned this later, of course. She had been to the doctor and likely should have been hospitalized. She asphyxiated on her own vomit and she died that afternoon in my mom's arms. And I remember these huge firemen who appeared in our living room to try and save her, and the oxygen mask that they had available to them covered her entire head. I'll never forget. So as I look back and join you this afternoon, and from this perch of 71 years, I see that at a very young age, I was working to find the intersections between my sister's death, or death at all for that matter, and the Catholic cosmology that permeated my upbringing. And this was not a law and order stricture by any means, but really a spacious idea of a loving God and how life is interpreted in light of the idea of eternity. The Sufi poet Hafiz in the 14th century says it this way in his poem, Deepening the Wonder. He writes, "And as the master poured, I would be reminded that all I know of life and myself is that we are just a mid-air flight of golden wine between his pitcher and his cup." Now, growing up, we certainly weren't taught the wisdom of Hafiz, but we may as well have been. Before and after my sister's death, her name was Maureen. Before and after Maureen's death in my family, it was never a question of how a loving God can do this, but much more a sense of knowing that we are not alone in whatever life brings us. And I'm reminded here, and somehow I got this also through my skin, of Richard Rohr's idea that God protects us from nothing but sustains us in everything. The lore in my family is that the night my sister died, my grandpa showed up on our doorstep to embrace his daughter, my 31-year-old mom, whose baby had died in her arms that afternoon. And he said to her, "I'm not worried about her. I'm worried about you." So to be sure, for me, there was no putting this genie back into the bottle. Much of my youthful journey came into the light of continued understanding as I grew into adulthood, and certainly after I started my work in end-of-life care in the mid-90s. I started as a volunteer in hospice, co-facilitating a weekly children's bereavement group for kids ages 5 to 12. Go figure. Of course, I was attending to myself. When Maureen died in 1961, hospice was more than a decade away in the United States, and certainly there was no grief support for my folks, my siblings, or for me. As a practicing attorney in the 1990s, I pursued a graduate degree in theology and spirituality at the San Francisco Theological Seminary, a Presbyterian and UCC seminary, one of 9 seminaries connected to the Graduate Theological Union at UC Berkeley. I didn't seek ordination, and I didn't pursue this inquiry to change careers. I had been a religious studies major in college, and I have always found that religion at its best, and now that's a conversation we can have sometime, but at its best, it's one of the bowls that holds the great questions. It was in this deep water that I wanted to swim. Now, my graduate studies in theology led me to end of life work, as our mortality is another and I think related bowl that also holds the great questions. And here I'm reminded of Rilke's statement, love and death are the great gifts that are given to us. Mostly they are passed on unopened. Now, Rilke's larger philosophy often centered around the idea that human beings tend to shy away from the most profound experiences of life because they're difficult, frightening, and or require a radical vulnerability. My sister's death was my first encounter with the unopened gift. It taught me many things. It taught me that we cannot change the fact of death, but I think we can change how we carry the weight of it. Now, Rilke says that these gifts are passed mostly unopened. Today, we have the courage to break the seal, untie the ribbon. These waters that we will swim in together may be cold, deep, both. However they are, I want to thank you for being here. Let's dive in. To give you a bit of a roadmap, and as Astrid said, this afternoon I want to explore with you largely 3 things. We may take some detours, we'll see. But we want to talk about how we come to peace, how silence and systems can undermine that peace, and how we give peace away now and later. And as we will discuss, and as Rilke observed, our modern culture overcomes the fear of death, I think, by largely not thinking about it, and certainly not talking about it. Those of us in hospice are not the most popular people at the cocktail party. We aren't great in our culture at the death and dying conversations, much, I think, to our detriment. I would suggest that our American culture that valorizes consumerism, productivity, and achievement tends to work against our consideration of what matters most, to borrow a phrase from Ira Byock. And it's also true that the world of incredible medical advancements can also be complicit. Our ability to stave off death can work against opening the gift that Rilke talks of. So as we have said today, our goal today is a courageous one. We'll ask the question, how do we attend in concrete ways, both internal or spiritual, if you will, and external, to practices and actions that lead to peace for ourselves now, at the end of life, and for wholeness for those that are left behind. This is, of course, a personal conversation. What does it mean to each of us to live in peace, leave in peace, and to leave those who grieve our loss in peace? It is also a professional conversation, as many on this call work with those who have a life-limiting diagnosis, are on palliative care programs, are on our hospice services, and there are still others of us on the call who are supporting those that are grieving the loss of a special person. We meet patients and families across the continuum of the conversation that we will have today. And there are a few things that I want to be sure that we say right up front as we begin. First, it is so important that we don't romanticize or generalize. Every life and every dying is unique to each person and the circumstances of their leaving. Dying is hard work. And this is also importantly not a conversation about what is a good death. I have grown to be both weary and wary of this idea. It has the flavor of judgment and an agenda that somehow we need to do it right. Our work at the bedside is to meet people where they are and to not to convince them that they somehow need to do it differently. And I also want to hold space for the stories that don't follow a roadmap. Sudden death from accident, stroke, heart attack, and more, and those who inexplicably choose to take their own life. These deaths leave much in their wake, questions that do not resolve neatly, and I want to acknowledge them without pretending to answer them. Another tricky piece in this conversation involves those who die from Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative diseases, where mentation as death approaches can be so difficult. Peace here may not look like insight or resolution, yet it still can look like love, presence, and protection. Astrid mentioned that in this day and age, many of us will see a death that we see coming. In 2006, Boston journalist Stephen Kernan wrote an important book entitled Last Rites: Rescuing the End of Life from the Medical System. And he makes the very salient observation that the largest societal transformation in America over the last decades is in how we die. This is quite a statement in light of the huge social changes that we have seen over the past 50, 60 years. Civil rights, the women's movement, the important environmental movement, to name just a few. Kiernan says that for millennia and as recently as the 1970s, most people died suddenly. The advent of licensed paramedics and the 911 system in the 70s, along with remarkable medical advances, now mean that many of us live longer and die from disease or co-occurring diseases associated with aging. Kiernan says the change for a growing number of people every day is this. Dying today is gradual. For the first time in human history, we can anticipate our mortality. Many will die a death we see coming. We can look it in the eye. Now, many of us on this call work with patients and families every day who are somewhere along the continuum of this recognition. In my experience as a hospice chaplain, I've been privileged to accompany many patients and their families in the last months, weeks, and days of their lives. I have long said that whatever else hospice is, it is also a time, a symbol in which we are living with the emerging truth that cure is no longer an option and that we are living at the end of our lives. In this precious and rarefied space, we come to understand that finding peace at the end of life has very much to do with what our life has meant to us and to those we love. When we're still treating for our disease, when we're anticipating another round of chemo, another radiation treatment, perhaps another surgical procedure, this leaning into our leaving is understandably very difficult, if not impossible. My dad lived remarkably well with pancreatic cancer for close to a year. At almost the 1-year anniversary of his diagnosis, he underwent surgery to alleviate a stomach blockage. And as soon as they opened him up, they knew he was full of cancer. They closed him back up after putting in a gastric tube to make him more comfortable. And we were told that he had 6 weeks to live. The surgeon who was so candid with my dad and with all of us gave us a great gift. It was time to say what was needed to be said. and his friends and extended family came to visit, there were heartfelt farewells and many tears. I think it gave my dad a great sense of peace to go through with me the home repairs that mom's house would need. He was finishing up his business as we assured him that we would be there for mom in whatever way that she would need. Over the weeks, we would see Dad staring at the family picture above the fireplace, the one that we had gathered to have taken the summer before, in light of his cancer. The photo included him and mom, their 4 kids and spouses, their 10 grandchildren. I would watch and I would think, who knows what he's thinking and feeling as he's staring at the picture. Now, my dad wasn't perfect, and I recall one afternoon the hospice chaplain emerging dry-eyed from his bedroom asking for a box of Kleenex. We were so thankful that he had this man to talk to. A summing up for my dad meant a clear-eyed look at the times that he had missed the mark as well. And I'm reminded of what Leonard Cohen writes in his song anthem, "Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." Now, a life well lived does not mean a perfect life. And as we look at the vast landscape of the life we have lived, finding peace is about seeing the cracks and looking for the light. It is not by any means a report card. And at the same time, our work is in many ways to come to terms with all that our life has been. Our ability to do this with equanimity and compassion for ourselves and others is most helpful in the journey toward peace. Surgeon and author Atul Gawande says it this way in his New York Times bestseller, Being Mortal: "Our ultimate goal, after all, is not a good death, but a good life to the very end." And this means, to the greatest extent possible, that we need to know the truth of our circumstances. It is in the reality of this emerging truth that meaning and peace can be found. Sometimes we think it kind to be encouraging, even unrealistically so, to not take away hope. Dr. Sherwin Newland, in his book, How We Die, said it this way, and I think this is so important. "Of the many ways to die alone, the most comfortless and solitary must surely take place when the knowledge of death's certainty is withheld." Here again, it is the "I couldn't take away his hope" attitude that is so often precisely how a particularly reassuring form of hope is never allowed to materialize. Unless we are aware that we are dying and, so far as possible, know the conditions of our death, we cannot share any sort of final consummation with those who love us. In my experience at the bedside, I came to find that I am deeply attracted to what I came to call the really real. As my patient and his or her family grew connected to the deep reality of approaching death, the unimportant and trivial would fall to the wayside, and what mattered most would come to the fore. In the space of the really real, what I saw was that finding peace has almost everything to do with relationships. As we are able, peace is found in conversations of gratitude and reconciliation, where stories of our shared lives abound. Now, does this happen in every home of every patient we have? No. And it's not our job to put a square peg into a round hole to make people see the truth of what's going on. But does it happen often? Absolutely. And it's our job to accompany this truth as it emerges in the journey of patient and family. This was true for my dad. In the last 6 weeks of his life, we were able to forgive and seek forgiveness, express our love and gratitude for his life and what that life had meant to all of us. And importantly, he was able to do the same with dear friends and his family. He was able to express his gratitude for his life and the deep sadness of leaving, and both were an integral part of his journey toward peace. And because we can turn toward conversations and contemplation around our mortality, and because so many of us will die a death that we see coming, as Kiernan has says, finding peace at the end of our lives is in fact not something that we are lucky to stumble on, but is a process in which we can engage today, tomorrow, and for the rest of our lives. Ancient wisdom and volumes of contemporary writing speak of the value of reflecting on our mortality and the myriad benefits of not just reflecting on our mortality, but also on planning ahead. Both can help to bring us peace now in the midst of our lives and importantly at the end of life. And both require intentionality and courage. My teacher and friend and Astrid's friend, Frank Ostaseski, says it this way in his seminal work, The 5 Invitations, Discovering What Death Can Teach Us About Living Fully. Frank writes that to imagine at the time of our dying, we will have the physical strength, emotional stability, and mental clarity to do the work of a lifetime is a ridiculous gamble. Reflecting on death can have a profound and positive impact, not just on how we die, but how we live. The Roman philosopher Seneca teaches, let us prepare our minds as if we had come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books every day. The one who puts the finishing touches on their life each day is never short of time. Now, I want to make a bit of a shift here. Up until now, we have been largely talking about the spiritual or interior work of finding peace. I want to move toward a conversation about how systems and silence can sabotage our movement toward finding peace, and also strategies to confound that silence and to work within the system without getting swallowed up by it. In a past life, I practiced law for almost 30 years, much of it alongside my work in end-of-life care. I didn't do estate planning, but my wife Ellen did. We were fortunate to practice together for the last 10 years of our legal careers. And as clients would come to see Ellen, 2 things were never lost on me. The folks that would come in to do their will or their trust or both, along with their advance directives, they were looking ahead and they were leaning into the death and dying conversation. Now, I'm not sure that was top of mind. They were probably just checking off an important box, but you can't do one without the other. But I think the important point is in doing these documents, in attending to their advance directive, they were giving those who would be left behind a tremendous gift. Getting our legal affairs in order, making sure our loved ones know how we feel and what we would choose in the event that we can no longer speak for ourselves. And importantly, having conversations about those choices with our loved ones is an act of compassion. And this also includes what we would like after our death. Do we want to be buried, cremated, or composted? Where do we want to be buried or have our ashes scattered? What post-death rituals might we want or not want? Knowing our loved ones' choices in advanced illness, at the end of life, and after death helps to prevent the horrible distress we see when family members are conflicted and unaware of what their loved one would want. On the flip side, knowing brings peace. Now, conversely, without a plan, the medical system can take over. The miraculous advances in medicine that offer us the opportunity to live much longer are also designed to do everything they can to fix indeed to keep us alive, and they're really good at it. And we know that sometimes everything can include futile, painful, and sometimes unnecessary treatment. For decades now, poll after poll suggests that a huge percentage of us want to die at home, surrounded by those who love us. And even as we speak this afternoon, nowhere near that number gets their wish. Of course, there are many reasons for this. And this is also true. Our silence can lead to defaulting to the system. My colleague Christy Knudsen writes of the death avoidance cycle. She proposes that our silence leads to a lack of planning. The lack of planning leads to poor medical outcomes, dying that can be clinical, painful, and chaotic. This can be impossibly difficult for the patient and results in moral distress for the family. Christy opines that these poor medical outcomes lead to complicated grief for those who are left behind, and then this comes full circle and leads to more cultural silence. It's risky business to leave this conversation unsaid. When our loved ones do not know our wishes, all manner of calamity can and in fact does occur. And when we are not able to have these conversations with our loved ones and trusted friends, when we're unable to turn toward our mortality, we risk these poor medical outcomes that fly in the face of finding peace at the end of our life. Almost 5 years ago, my 91-year-old mother-in-law suffered a significant brain bleed. She was critically ill. The ER folks, who were so well-intended, they wanted to airlift her to Seattle, a 2-hour plus drive for us, at the height of COVID, to schedule her for an emergency surgery. This is the last thing my mother-in-law would have wanted, and thank goodness her 3 daughters knew this. Nonetheless, it was not easy that night to get the docs to stand down. My mother-in-law died peacefully within a week on hospice, surrounded by love and the most tender care. Had she been airlifted to Seattle, the high likelihood was that we would never have seen her alive again, given the COVID restrictions in place at the time. So this is what preparation buys us, not necessarily control as much as fidelity to who our loved one is and what they would choose. The story of my mother-in-law is a vivid example of why health systems innovation is so critical. There's lots of good work being done, and of course, there's still more we can do. We spoke earlier of Atul Gawande. Dr. Gawande founded Ariadne Labs, a remarkable think tank for health systems innovation at Brigham and Women's Hospital and the Chan School of Public Health at Harvard. Their work in serious illness care is groundbreaking and important for our conversation today. Some of their findings include, first of all, who knew? Better conversations, better care. They focus on the idea that medical care must be based on values, not just biology. Interestingly, they found that physicians are frustrated by a lack of patient direction. So this cultural silence, and our inability to plan ahead sometimes frustrates our docs when they don't know what the patient and family would want. And they also find that docs want to have these conversations, but often don't know how. Clearly, the focus needs to be, they say, on the patient's experience of their illness rather than solely on their medical condition. And for decades in hospice, we have been saying that dying is so much more than a medical event. Now, the beauty of the work of Dr. Gawande and his team is how it offers both patient and family agency and the opportunity to find peace inside the medical system and as their illness unfolds. Gawande and his team are working with docs and other providers to have better conversations that include the following questions. What is your understanding of your illness and the future? This is really a conversation about diagnosis, prognosis, the doc saying, I'm concerned. It's a conversation about the emerging truth. Another question, if your health worsens, what are your most important goals? And here's where we find out that my son's being married next fall. We have a grandchild due. We have a family reunion coming up. Really helpful for the doc and team to know what the patient's goals are. So they just don't know the size of the tumor and the best chemo. They know what the holistic picture is for this patient. What are your biggest worries and fears? I'm afraid to leave my spouse alone. I don't want to be a burden to my family. I'm afraid of dying in pain. Now the team and the patient are engaged in the experience of the patient, not just the biology. Another one, what trade-offs are you willing to make for more time? This is really a conversation about the costs, all the costs of aggressive treatment. What are the trade-offs? These four essential questions demystify the process. They lift the veil of silence and gently but insistently invite both patient and family to lean into the emerging truth. They offer a person who may have little control choices about how their experience might unfold. These better conversations advocated for by Gawande and his team are crucial for physician and patient, but importantly, they also provide a roadmap for us for discussions with our loved ones and with our healthcare proxy. Otherwise, we are spelunking without a headlamp. Now, we've discussed the legalities, getting your affairs in order, so to speak, by way of a will or other estate planning vehicles. These are documents that protect our earthly goods and they streamline their transition. Importantly, we have talked about advanced directives for healthcare and how we give ourselves dignity and agency in the healthcare maze and offer our loved ones the peace of knowing our wishes. Now let us turn to the art and legacy that can bring us peace and protect the hearts of those we leave behind. Very soon, and Astrid, I promise, we're going to talk about ethical wills. But before we go there, I want to tee the concept up a bit through a discussion of the importance of leaving a nurturing spirit, to use a phrase from theologian Ron Rolheiser. Expanding on a concept from Henry Nouwen, Rolheiser says that in our wisdom years, our work is to give our death away. And we do this by how well we live as by how we leave. Rolheiser asks the question, how do we live now so that our death leaves behind a nurturing spirit, one that is nourishing, warming, and consoling? He reiterates one of our major themes here today: when we die at peace, we leave those who grieve our loss at peace. Rolheiser comments that how we die and the state of our spirit is our final and most important gift. He says that our wisdom years can be an act of generativity in a time of diminished physical capacity. It includes accepting the passivities of aging, diminishment, loss of control, and vulnerability without becoming bitter or resentful. He sees our diminished physical capacity as having the potential for liberation from self-importance and as a path to greater compassion for the suffering of others, thereby enlarging the soul. He emphasizes that how we live into aging and physical decline matters. His language is stark. We leave behind a spirit that either nurtures or haunts our loved ones. If we die full of anger, unresolved grudges, or clinging to our power and importance, we leave behind a toxic spirit that makes our survivors feel guilty or burdened. If we die at peace, having forgiven ourselves and others, we leave behind a spirit that gives our loved ones sacred permission to be happy and at peace, along, of course, with our human experience of grief. Rolheiser tells a wonderful story about an old woman. She is wise and at peace, living gracefully into her old age, and is sought out by many for her love and counsel. One young person says to her, "I want to be like you when I'm old," and her response is lovely. She simply says, "Start now." Now, another very specific strategy for finding peace at the end of life is to prepare an ethical will for those who will grieve your loss most deeply. First, I will comment that it's remarkable how much feedback I have received about what a misnomer the term ethical will is. I think a better name is lasting letters, a term that letter midwife and author Frisch Brandt uses. You will also see legacy letter, heart letter, a forever note, and there are more. Whatever nomenclature we use, an ethical will is an ancient tradition for passing on personal values, beliefs, blessings, and advice to family, friends, and future generations. This lasting letter can mean so much more than any material possession that we might bequeath to those we leave behind. It should also be said that these intangible gifts can be passed on via videotape, poetry, music, and all manner of art. Barry Baines, a physician, wrote a book, Ethical Wills, Putting Your Values on Paper, some years ago now. He writes, those who want to be remembered authentically and for their gifts of heart, mind, and spirit take satisfaction in knowing that what they hold most valued is on the record, not to be lost or forgotten. An ethical will may include apologies for the times that we have missed the mark, and crucially includes expressions of gratitude and love. It transmits a spiritual or intangible legacy that provides guidance, peace, and blessings to those who remain. We mentioned Ira Byock earlier. Many years ago now, he wrote a seminal book that still provides important guidance for all of us, entitled The Four Things That Matter Most. Dr. Byock pursues this idea of finding peace and passing it on, giving our death away, as Rolheiser suggests. The four things that matter most are, please forgive me, I forgive you, thank you, and I love you. Now, earlier I mentioned my friend and colleague Frisch Brandt. She is, among many things, a letter midwife. She has worked with many dying people, curating letters for them in their last months, weeks, and days, intended for those that they will leave behind. In her new book, Unfinished Business, Writing the 5 Essential Letters of Your Life, Frisch says it this way: a lasting letter is a note written now for later, carrying your voice forward in time and space. People write to their children, their partner, their long deceased parent, their ex, the teacher that made a difference, their estranged friend, and more. We all have something we wish to say for now, for later, perhaps for all time. And Frisch adds to the four things, perhaps most importantly, from her view, goodbye needs to be added to Dr. Bioch's list. I was speaking with Frisch about this talk just the other day, and she was telling me about how important and how big she thinks that goodbye is. She says it leads to so much more. I'm sorry. I miss you. I need to tell you something. I am grateful for, and more. She told me that Dr. Bioch was asked years after writing his book what he might add to the four things. And he said it would be so helpful for a parent to tell their child that they're proud, proud to be their parent, proud of them. And Frisch says this is surely a part of goodbye. Frisch writes, and it's on your screen, and I think this is important for us. What has surprised me, and I think will surprise you, is that while we are focused on the letter's recipient, it is the letter writer that is served first by the letter. Passing on these intangible gifts bring us peace as we move toward the end of our life. Helps us finish up our work. It's a real win-win. Now, I am not alone in suggesting that the thoughtful process of preparing an ethical will need not wait until one is imminently dying. In fact, one of the 5 invitations that Frank Ostaseski writes of is, don't wait. We need not wait to tell those we love how loved they are and how much their lives have meant to our lives. Let them know how grateful we are that the path of their star crossed the path of ours. And if we have unfinished business, now is the time to talk this through. We need not wait until we are on our deathbed to have conversations of gratitude and reconciliation. And as we have said, the process of preparing and even sharing such a document now can bring great meaning and peace in this day and at the end of our days. As poet, anti-war activist, and Jesuit priest Daniel Berrigan says so well, first things recognizably first. Now, I would like to invite you to participate in a little exercise with me about what you would say and to who. This is just for you to do. I mean, one of the breaks is that I'll stop talking for a while. It's a personal exercise. We'll just take a few minutes to respond to a few prompts, but it's going to give us a little flavor and a little taste of what this would be like. First, before we do that, I would ask you as you're listening to grab a pen or pencil and a piece of paper. I do want to tee this up a little bit by telling you about an exercise that we used to do when we would teach volunteers. We would teach a whole class of folks that wanted to learn to be bereavement support volunteers. It was a pretty thorough training, 4 evenings and then a Saturday retreat where we would focus on our own losses. And part of that Saturday retreat, we would pass out butcher paper and all manner of crayons and markers, and we would ask them to draw a picture that would represent a loss in their life. This was important. We would ask them to draw with their non-dominant hand, and this moved them right from the left brain to the right brain. There was no judgment about, am I drawing a picture that looks like what I want it to look like? Am I coloring inside the lines? there was the judgment about how well am I doing left because we said do it with your non-dominant hand. And so for this exercise, I want to invite you to let your heart and intuition take the lead. Imagine you are drawing with your non-dominant hand. This is the work of the intellect. Beg your pardon. It's not the work of our intellect. It's the work of our soul. So, and this can be a list. This can be a paragraph. This can be whatever you want it to be. You don't have to share it. We're not going to grade it. Imagine yourself on an airplane. This is from Frisch book. On an airplane that is in distress, bad turbulence, mechanical difficulties. What would you say and to who? Or imagine a life-limiting diagnosis. Our first prompt is, and we'll just take a couple minutes for each. What I want you to know. Is what I am grateful for. What I hope for you. What I have learned meant what I said about that these aren't going to be graded, and I don't mean to be trite. Um, I think the exercise and what we are experiencing is it's what it's like to lean into these reflections. What's interesting, and this is true even for our advanced directives, and I think important to comment on, we change our mind. The content changes. What we write in our letter today may be different next year. I know people that write a new letter every year. So it's not, do I have to have it right? Do I have to know exactly? But it's really about what does it feel like to start thinking about not just attending to how we pass our material wealth to our loved ones, but how we let them know how loved they are and how proud we are and whatever else we need to do for ourselves. Um, I'm curious if anyone would like to just say a word about what that was like for them or what it feels like to think about doing this kind of exercise for your loved ones. And of course, no one, or you can put a comment in
Oh,
the chat or
I had a question for you.
yes.
Um, First off, I think doing it left-handed was interesting because it really does kind of go to a different kind of process. And some of the stuff that I thought about before around this kind of thing that was less kind of intellectual and more emotional really came to the fore by doing it like with your non-dominant hand, which I thought was really interesting.
Okay.
And
Thank
a
you.
couple
Yeah.
other notes here too. I don't know if it's possible to make like a reading list of some of the books you've mentioned and make that available somehow.
Thank you for saying that. I will. I know this talk is going to be posted. In fact, I got a message offline about is this recorded? And I know Astrid will say something, but people can listen to this off our website, the Volunteer Hospice of Clallam County website, and I will be sure that we post somewhere a bibliography because I do think that um, might be helpful. And there's a lot of other great materials out there that I haven't referred to in this talk necessarily. I did see on the chat that Maria said this was difficult. Anyone else? Was it hard? I'm the first one to admit that I'm happy to pass and watch the football game. Honestly, it's not easy necessarily.
Jody has a comment here. The questions were very poignant. The exercise was deeply meaningful. I feel I composed a healing letter to my sister that was also healing to me. Just as you said, Mike, it's the letter writer who benefits as much.
Mm. Mhm.
Yeah. And Joaquinda, I realized that everything that I wrote was for them to be okay with my death. What I found for myself was that I am in a place right now where I'm really trying to think, what am I grateful for? And it was interesting. It was interesting. And I appreciate the comment you made afterwards saying that, of course, this will change. This is today in this moment.
Yeah.
Tomorrow might be a different thing, and next year hopefully will be a different thing.
Yeah. I think that's true.
Yeah.
I'm going to circle back to advanced directives because the literature and the studies are that when we say, well, I don't want a ventilator, or I don't want this medical procedure when we're healthy and 60 or 40 or 70. And lots of times we change our minds.
Mhm.
What they find, though, this is so interesting to me, is that it's not really about what you choose or don't choose. Folks that do their advanced directives and have the conversations with their families and their loved ones have better outcomes. It really doesn't have to do with whether we stick with what we planned, because we're always free to change our minds. But I think this process, this process of leaning in is good for our living as well. Anybody else before we move on? Any more
Yeah, Lou sorry. If someone wants to talk.
Yes, I would like
Yes,
to
Tatiana.
share.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the exercise was really, really helpful for me because I found that I was able to write very little because I was doing with my left hand. But it was important. It was the emotional that if I was probably writing with my right hand, I will write a 2 pages letter saying a bunch of things that it was from my mind. But it was so difficult with my left hand that it was really things that I even forgot about it. But it was just I guess my subconscious mind or my emotions just really putting my heart into it.
Right.
So, but also, I have like a fear of, and I think you say something like, we're never going to make it right. Like I want to kind of make it right. And I guess it's because I had so many years to think about it. For some reason, whatever my purpose, my mission is, I have known and seen the death of my parents, which they still alive, in dreams. Like I come out of my body and I'm there with them talking. And that was the first time it happened, was 9 years ago. I was like, why this happened to me? Like, what do I supposed to do with this? And after like almost 9, probably 8 years, it's sort of like things are kind of happening. I actually just received this email while I was at the airport yesterday, coming from United States after 21 years coming back home. And coming back home, that's the reason I'm coming back home, because in a soul level, I feel like I must be here. I have to be here for whatever is going to happen to my parents, because I'm the only one in the family that is in a more, grounded mind and my feet, so it's a lot, because I feel like I'm alone in this.
Yeah.
But so I was so grateful to see at the airport this email. Like, oh, thank you, I'm on the right path.
Good. Does writing that out help clarify that for you?
Yes,
Okay.
a lot.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I see, Mike, is your hand up?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I apologize. I wasn't able to figure out how to raise my hand. I really appreciated you bringing up the left hand or the non-dominant hand writing. When my wife died 7 or 8 years ago, someone had talked about that at a meeting, and I I started doing it, and I started having a dialogue with my wife.
Uh-huh.
I would say something, I would write something, and then the first time I tried it, I went to my left hand, and I had this strange feeling that it was not me, that there was some connection, and what was coming out was very, very striking. And in any way, I just, I'd forgotten about that. I had done it for 2 or 3 years, and now I realize it's a wonderful device or method to revisit and do some more of that. And I think it is very powerful. But yeah, it was actually a very strange feeling, and I recall through my journaling, and I've journaled forever, and it maybe 3 or 4 years after that, it would just come up like in my journals, and now I've gone back and collected those dialogues, and I want to start up with them again. I think it's a wonderful prompt anyway.
Well, good.
I also want to say I really like this notion of an ethical will.
Uh-huh.
Because what I found is over the recent years, my journaling has turned into an ethical will, and so I'm actually putting some of it, the more relevant thoughts or whatever. So I greatly appreciate that. Yeah,
I'm glad that the left-hand approach is helpful, and again, what you're saying, I think reinforces our collective understanding, and that you're enjoying, funny word, but enjoying the ethical will process, and the recipient hasn't even received it yet, in a sense, right? It's really your work for you, and then it's a gift for others. I love the win-win of that. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Mike.
Yeah. I'm actually writing a manuscript, and it's called Words to Myself.
Okay, good.
So somebody else, if they're interested, can pick up.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good
Thanks
for you.
again.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mike. We had a question here in the chat from Lou. Could you say something for people who don't have close relatives or friends, or for those who have outlived most of their friends and family?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. We have good friends that don't have kids, and they have asked the same question. I think, first of all, I'm not sure, to be quite honest with you. My sense about that is that when we think about passing on our legacy, often people leave material wealth to causes they believe in, things they feel are important for the world, um, land trust or food banks, whatever they feel that benefit humanity in their way, and that's part of who they are. And so I would guess that when we're coming to terms with what our life has meant, we think about what are our values? What do we want for the world? So maybe what our hopes are. Maybe we just translate these questions into a larger universe, if you will. That's my sense. Ellen and I have 4 kids, and so honestly, when I think about it, it becomes more closer to home. Having said that, I think part of what we would want them to know about us are those things that we hold dear and believe in, including causes and concerns for humanity. So that's kind of the best I can do around that. I think we can still participate in this process, remembering that it's a process of us coming to terms with what our life has meant, as well as what we want to share. I hope that's helpful.
I think it is. Lou is writing, wow, thank you for your response.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah.
We have another comment from Julia. she says, when I was chaplain to chaplains in our military service, I recall being asked, who can forgive me for all I didn't say or do when all feels like I'm falling apart and feeling unworthy? Many have basic questions about the embodiment of who is God, who allows all the ugliness and pain and loss we experience in our human experiences.
Well, that's a big one.
Yeah.
And we could spend a whole other talk on that, I think. But I'll go back to where we started when Richard Rohr says that God protects us from nothing, but sustains us in everything. And I think that flies in the face, and to me, it resonates, but it flies in the face of this air traffic controller God that makes all this bad stuff, or somehow is, you get leukemia, you don't, you get cured, you don't, this plane crashes. I just, for me, I don't buy it. I don't think that that's how this mystery that we call God, if in fact that's how you experience your spirituality, I just don't see it as an arbitrary puppet master. So I think, although I have a lot of compassion for the question, because I think it is how much of Western religion is fed to us. It's why at the beginning I was very specific to say that in my family, we didn't say, well, how can God do this to us? As if God does this. So, and I think that we all miss the mark. So I want to go back to the question, and then we won't. How can God forgive me? My experience is that God is far too busy loving us to be critical. I mean, those of you that have kids, people miss the mark. We're human. I don't think it's a report card. So I think we have to kind of rearrange our understanding. Otherwise, it's so punitive, and it does, and it feels so arbitrary. Like so, but that's I don't think I'm doing justice to a really important question. It's kind of the best I can do in the moment.
And it's a big question, Mike. And maybe Jody is helping a little bit here. She says Richard Rohr writes about how he sees that God is within the suffering with us, that he has solidarity with us in that suffering.
Yeah. I'm a huge Richard Rohr fan, and I would highly recommend reading some of his stuff. It's thank you for that, for offering that, because that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. There is also a comment to the comment about not having family to write, legacy letters or ethical will. Maureen says, just put what you need to say out in the universe for kindred spirit. Okay. I think she means kindred. I often read things from people I do not know and get so much from them. There are many disconnected people who would love to hear from you.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Another one also that I had missed here. Wakinda is also making a book suggestion. It's a book called Into the Arms of Death by Grace Helms. Wakinda mentioned that it has really helped her in her work as an end-of-life doula. And
yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know this one.
Yeah.
And to address what John was saying much earlier about the list of the books, if you want to send me this, Mike, after the talk, then I can add it to the recording that all people who have registered will get. So I can add that.
Okay.
List of books
I'd be happy to do that. I'll be happy to do that.
Yeah. No rush.
Maybe we should work toward bringing this to a close, Astrid? What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and anyone else has any other comments that they?
Yeah, I just have a couple more things to say, and
Oh,
then
okay.
love to and then and then we can spend the rest of our time with any more questions or comments. I really
Yeah.
appreciate everybody pitching in.
Mhm.
I guess before we close, just a couple of things. I do, and this came up a little bit. I do want to talk about those loved ones who have died and with whom we may have unfinished business. I think we can listen to this talk and go, well, I didn't have a chance to have this kind of closure with my dad, or, he never told me he was proud of me, or, I mean, there's myriad examples of that perchance. Um, and to this idea of saying this into the universe, um, it's said that death ends a life, not a relationship. And sometimes when I hear that, I think it's trite. I mean, death is irrevocable. And yet I think it can be. And in some of the books that I've looked at, it can be redeeming to say what was not said or left unsaid, to write it out or even speak it out loud to the universe, the thoughts and feelings about the most important things. You know, to it can help bring clarity to us and feel like we're still communicating. I'm just offering that as a possibility if we're sitting here thinking, you know, darn, um, I know that we are to a certain extent romanticizing the best of how this can go. And for those that are diagnosed with a neurodegenerative disease with Alzheimer's, I think it's really important that when we know of the diagnosis or we're concerned about the impending diagnosis, when mentation is still available to us, that is when it's really important to have conversations you need to have, to not wait, because we know that the time urgency is important as that disease progresses. Um, I want to tell you a story as well before we end about my friend Mark. He was dying of alcohol-related cirrhosis. He was terrified. He was full of guilt and struggling with the heavy weight of regret. He knew he didn't have long, but as we sat on his porch just weeks before he died, he realized he had a choice. And he chose to be heroic. He spoke the four things to his wife, Sarah, and his 19-year-old son. He expressed his deep apologies, his sadness about leaving, and his boundless love. And he understood how how he left would be the memory and experience that his wife and son carried forever.
Mm.
So through the cracks, he and his family found the light and I think peace.
Mhm.
So as the wise woman said, we can start now. By attending to this practice of leaving a nurturing spirit today, you are about the work of leaving in peace and importantly, leaving those you love at peace too. I sure appreciate all of you leaning in this afternoon and for your attention. I've enjoyed it and happy to. We have a few minutes. I'm happy to take any more questions. But again, I really do thank you all for being here. Valerie, I see a hand up. And you're on mute.
Why can't I put my hand?
I apologize for coming in late. I had a meeting and I couldn't get out of it. So, I've lost both of my parents and one of my brothers, who I was extremely close to a couple years ago. But someone had shared this with me, and if you just have like a minute, I'll share it with you. And it's called The Dance of Life. Has anybody heard about this? It's from Henry Nouwen.
Mhm.
And it says, as we grow older, we have more and more people to remember, people who have died before us. It is very important to remember those who have loved us and those who we have loved. Remembering them means letting their spirits inspire us in our daily lives. They can become part of our spiritual communities and gently help us as we make decisions on our journeys. Parents, spouses, children, and our friends can become true spiritual companions after they have died. Sometimes they can become even more intimate to us after death than when they were with us in life. Remembering the dead is choosing their ongoing companionship. And for me, my parents divorced when I was an eighth grader, and it left many, many battle scars, much shark music in my head all the time, and much guilt and shame. And so for me, when my father died, I was not very close to him. My mom was always my anchor. But when I read this, I think of my dad and some of the spiritual connections that I've had with him. And he's been gone for many years. My mom's only been 6 years. But to me, this always gives me meaning, and it helps me try and center myself when I'm feeling low and sad. I can read this and feel that kind of connection that I feel like I need.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
I wonder if Patrick, if you wanted to say something.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm kind of sick in bed today, so I did not activate my camera. However, I've taken 3 pages of notes from this session today. I've got a whole bunch of to-dos to communicate to family and friends of how meaningful they've been to me. And I think it's the best session I've heard to date. And there have been some darn good ones. So thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you, Patrick.
Patrick. Very nice of you. I hope you feel better.
I'll be all right.
Any other comments? I'm reading lots of thank yous. The importance of changing in legal terms, putting names to a deed. Wakinda shared that one of her client's husband had not done that and did not write a will, and with Alzheimer's and waiting too long, it took her a lot of effort to get the house in her name. And that's one of the issues that sometimes we face. Yeah, lots of thank you. And Mike, your son Tim said thank you.
I saw that. That's sweet.
That's very sweet. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, good thought-provoking discussion from Sherry. Very impactful from Mia. Appreciate your energy, knowledge, and compassionate heart from Deb. Yeah, this was really, really nice. Michael would like to speak. Hi, Michael.
Hi, yeah. Just got a quick question. Understanding that the best time to start is now, sharing these kinds of thoughts and feelings with strained relations before death. I can imagine how some people might not be able to receive them if there's been conflict and struggle, and might even have an unintended consequence. So I'm just kind of wondering about your thoughts or experience around trying to make peace before death versus leaving some kind of ethical letter, will, note for someone to reflect on after you're gone, where there's been difficulty or communication was cut off.
Well, that is such a good question. And I would say you'd have to kind of braille out the individual relationship and the circumstance. And I'm not trying to duck that question, but I'm just saying, one person you might think, well, I can tell you this. I've had the experience where the diagnosis, I had a woman that was estranged from her mom for 6 years, and she was dying of pancreatic cancer. And she said, would you call my mom? And I was the hospice chaplain. And when her mom found out how time urgent it was, that the urgency and the enormity of the life-limiting diagnosis overcame the impediment. I mean, when I say that sometimes the trivial falls away, people are able to realize that whatever the hurts were aren't as important as the relationship. But does that always happen? I'm sure not. Right? I wouldn't want to sell you a car here and say, oh yeah, just reach out. I think you have to, and maybe the question, Michael, is what's best for you? Meaning because maybe you just don't have the energy or the strength, the stamina to encounter that person in life. Maybe it works for you to leave the apology or whatever you need to them by way of a letter. So you feel like, okay, I've finished that business with that person and I can leave. Again, I'm not romanticizing. I'm just saying that maybe the question is what works for you best, because I can think it would be very awkward to have an unfortunate encounter. When I think about my dad's last 6 weeks, that was a sacred space that he was living in. We wouldn't have wanted to try and mend some fence that wasn't mendable in a way. I mean, so again, that's a long-winded way of saying, I don't know. I mean, I think, yeah, you have to do it case by case, right? And I would, it all matters, like how important was this person? How important is reconciliation to you if you're the dying person? So, okay.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge topic. Maybe we'll do a speaker series on that one day.
Boy, some great stuff comes up here, right? It's
Yeah.
joining in.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Mike. This was really, really rich. Lots of comments, lots of deep appreciation for the work you do.
Well, my pleasure. Okay. Okay. Take care.